We talked about some different types of stress in the last video, but there's also a type of stress which can unlock even more physical and mental potential. I'm not saying that anyone is going to be able to train themselves to the point where they can access this potential. All I'm saying is that it exists, which is highly interesting and hopefully outlines the possibilities that exist and the reason that accessing more of your mind and more of your emotions is so potentially powerful. So, with that in mind, the first example is something called a flashbulb memory. And this demonstrates the ability we have to memorize things in vivid detail if we think the event is important enough. Now, think back to where you were at the time you first heard of the 9/11 attacks, or perhaps where you were when you first heard about Michael Jackson. Or alternatively, consider a moment that was particularly important in your own life, for good or bad. Chances are that you can remember these events in far more accurate detail than you can other parts of your biographical memory. This is what's known as a flashbulb memory. Partly, this is the result of repeated rehearsing. When something important happens, we play it over and over again in our minds. But it's also the result of neurotransmitters being released that change the way the memory is laid down and make those connections significantly stronger. Then there's crisis strength. Crisis strength, also known as hysterical strength, is the name given to incidents where people suddenly tap into incredible strength. The classic example here is the mother who manages to lift a vehicle off of their trapped child underneath. How is this possible? While there is very little in the way of scientific research looking at this phenomenon, there is a real theory as to how it might work. When you contract your muscle normally to lift something, your brain sends signals that travel through your central nervous system to the neurotransmuscular junction. Acetylcholine, yes, the neurotransmitter, is released, and this causes muscle fibers to fire. Only we're never quite capable of recruiting 100% of those muscle fibers. On average, we recruit around 30% of them, and even a trained athlete will only be able to get up to around 50%. This is thought to be an evolutionary limitation, the idea being that recruiting 100% of our muscle would leave us completely exhausted and vulnerable to attack. Moreover, it could actually cause injury by placing too much strain on our connective tissues and joints. But to demonstrate the kind of strength we actually have hidden away, just watch someone who gets an electric shock and gets thrown across the room. This is caused not by the electricity itself, but by the individual's muscles when they forcibly contract in response to the shock. This causes them to access 100% of their muscle fiber, which is enough to catapult them across the room, even if they weren't using a jumping technique. And there's one other way we seem to be able to tap into greater muscle contraction by stimulating the release of catecholamine, the neurotransmitters, and the fight or flight hormones. And it's hypothesized that under times of intense stress, we can engage much more muscle mass and thereby achieve superhuman strength. And again, this is a spectrum. Actually, causing even a minor fight or flight response is enough to somewhat increase your strength in the gym. Studies show that if we train with loud noises in the background, or if we train by shouting, which also stimulates the release of similar hormones, we're actually capable of engaging more muscle. So, psyching yourself up before a workout might just be one of the very best ways to improve your performance in the gym. Controlling, not suppressing stress might be the secret to unlocking your full potential.